Welcome to another episode of the Alley Report. Today we are honored to be talking to R.J. Joseph, author of the collection Hell Hath No Fury, Like a Woman Haunted, and her stories have been in a ton of anthologies, including Slasher, Paranormal Contact, Campfire Macabre, Texas Roadkill, and tons of others. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me today.
Hey, Elford, thank you so much for inviting me. This is exciting.
Woo! Yeah. That's- technical stuff aside, like Zoom's been getting both of us trouble today.
Yes, yes, exactly. Yeah, I'm just excited to finally meet you and get to talk to you. So
Yeah.
that's cool. This is all worth it. The tech stuff is all worth it.
Yeah, another Texas horror author. And and yeah, so what um Hell Hath No Fear, Like Woman Haunted is your debut collection, and um it's awesome. People
Oh,
watching
thank
this should
you.
get it. Should read it, absolutely. Um
Thank you.
what was it like bringing that together, your debut collection?
Well, it's kind of funny. I like to tell people one day I'll write my memoirs and all it's going to be is like all these stories about how I just fall off into stuff. And so I kind of fell off into the collection. A few years ago, I'd asked Gabino Iglesias. From there out of Austin. I can't think of the name of his new book, but the last one was The Devil Takes You Home. I'd invited him to speak at an academic conference that I'd hosted on my campus, and of course, he's a great guy that he is, and he just said, "Sure, I'll come on over." And so while we were having a break there, he asked me, he says, "Well, what are you working on?" And I just kind of went, oh well, I write these short stories, and I don't know, maybe I'll like put together a collection or something. He was like, you should do that, and I was going, yeah, okay, with really no intention of really doing that. But then he gets in my DMs a couple of weeks later, and it's like, hey, how's that collection going? And
I love that.
I thought, I have so many stories. Like, why did that occur to me before? And why can I not? Why shouldn't I do that?
Yeah.
So I kind of went through and sorted through the stories, and I go, okay, these kind of seem to go together, and yeah, let's just send this out and let's just see what happens. And I mean, I totally sent it to like the totally wrong publication, like, first off. I mean, because I really love what Clash Books does, but this collection is not rock and roll enough for Clash, like, at all. Right? So I thought, okay, they haven't said anything yet, but maybe I should probably withdraw this. I sent it to another small press. They said that they liked it, but they just didn't have the space. And then when I sent it to the Seventh Terrace, um, like, she emailed me, I swear, like a couple hours later, and was like, hey, so consider yourself shortlisted, and I have to talk to my partner, but I love this. And I mean, it was scary fast. Like, they snatched it up so fast. And I thought, oh, okay, well, this is apparently what I was supposed to be doing with this. And there it was. It was actually the most perfect place to work with, for this. They're really, really wonderful press. They're really, really wonderful people. So I'm excited. That was the home for us.
I love that you found it in such a short time period, and I absolutely
Right,
get you sent it to the wrong place just because you like it. Like I feel like I've done that with stuff. I sent it to
right.
places like it wasn't really a fit, but I just really wanted to work with them. And they're like,
Sure, sure. Yeah, yeah. I mean, of course, when the Seventh Terrace was like, yeah, we want this. I mean, I did send, the withdrawal email to Clash. I mean, I didn't say the whole, I'm sorry, I probably should have sent this to you anyway thing. I was like, we'll just leave that as it was.
anytime I've done that, I had to do that recently, like where I sent to press the thing, like withdrawing it, and they're always like, "You saved me," because like every time there's an opening, everyone's just inundated with hundreds of manuscripts. So I think the
Yes.
second they're like, "You know what? You saved me having to read it. I appreciate it."
Yes, yes. Oh no. Well, when I ran into Christoph at something, I think maybe in Virginia last year or so, or whatever, and I was like, I'm really sorry about that. And he was like, yeah, no worries. I said, I really shouldn't have said, it's really not the best fit. I mean, he's so cool. He was just like, yeah, I mean, no worries.
Yeah.
I was like, I know it wasn't Clash enough for Clash. Like, I would keep you from having to say it. I know that.
And then having the presses, the ones that are like, we just don't have the room right now. It's like, okay, well they're gonna stick around then. I feel like as we've seen recently, sometimes when the press is like, "We'll yeah, anybody, come on in, like, yeah, let's announce 40 new books," that doesn't
Oh
go
my,
well.
it does not. It does not. And this place really does do just. I mean, they do just enough. And I mean, I totally respect them. And I mean, they just didn't have the space, and I really support that because you're right. This whole the things we've been seeing recently, I do not understand why people do that to not just to themselves, but why they do that to the community. Like
Yeah,
none of us need that drama. So like pace yourself, take some business classes, like figure this stuff out before you jump out in the deep end.
yeah, um, yeah, and oh, one thing I wanted to talk about was so you have a story in Cemetery Gates Media's Paranormal Contact anthologies,
Yes.
and those are like,
Yes, I love Cemetery Gates. Oh, I love them.
oh, same. Like anything they put out, like I will read.
Yes,
I,
exactly.
I was just telling my wife, like I found it was actually this. It was like this. I found it at half price books for like $1, and it has like the best of horror writers of the '80s in it. And I was
Yeah,
reading it, and
yeah.
I was like these are okay, but it's like literally any anthology of Cemetery Gates will outdo this one. Like I don't know. Like I was
Yes.
reading, I was like, eh,
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes, I hope to. I do. I mean, every time they put something out, as a reader, I'm buying it. As a writer, I'm like, huh, do I have something that fits? Can I fit? Can I fit? They're really fast too. Like I think that over there, like well, you've worked with them. Like I think one Saturday morning, I'm looking at my emails and I'm like, okay, here's his contract. Oh yeah, that's cool. I literally sent back, okay, that's cool. And then like there's money like just in my
yeah,
account, and
like
I'm going, what? Yeah, they are wonderful. I
yeah, you
love
don't
cemetery.
have to
I
chase
love it.
down your cash. They'll just
Never
give you the
like
money.
no
You're
like
like,
it came before I even stepped away from the computer. I was like, wait a minute, what sorcery is this? And then I worked with them on another thing, and it happened again, and I went, oh, that's just how they roll. Okay, I dig it.
yeah, and that's why like I submit to like anything they do. Like I like the rejections outpace like my acceptances like 10 to 1 because it's just like I just want to work with them on any and everything.
Right, right, same.
But like with Paranormal Contact, that one was like all about like real ghost stories or at least ghost stories that feel real. Like with your story, how
Mhm.
much reality versus fiction was in it?
Okay, that story, it was one of those that I do my little coy little smile that you all can't see because of this text stuff, and I go, maybe it's true, but like behind the curtain, I go, yeah, like a lot of that really did happen. A lot of it, because it was really about generational trauma and abuse. And unfortunately, this is something that I have experienced. And a lot of that was true, believe it or not. I mean, all the way down to the demon face. I mean, of course, I fabricated a lot of stuff, so that folks would be coming out of the woodwork saying, I'm going to sue you and all this.
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, like it was really a true story of the generational trauma of abuse and how it's so cyclical in some families.
yeah, that's I mean that's absolutely and I asked another writer who's in it same thing because I'm just always curious, but yeah, that's like mine was, some names were changed to protect the innocent, but there
Sure.
is there is a lot of thing like I feel like sometimes families have a lot of ghost stories, but underneath those ghost stories, like you said, there's abuse and there's trauma, and it's
Yes.
like you can't talk about that, but you'll talk about the thing that made the bed shake, the thing that, threw open the
Exactly.
doors, like
Yes, yes. And that is like us here as Southerners, though, right? That's a really Southern thing. I mean, when I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like just for me. This whole anthology could be
yeah,
written about all kinds of stuff, that happens in our families. Like we have those generational secrets and that silence, like to this day, my mama and the elders, they still don't talk about a lot of stuff, once they realized we were actually listening to them, they kind of would start to clam up when they talk about those true things that would happen in the family. And so yeah, I think that anthology was a really perfect vehicle for that kind of stuff.
yeah, like I mean that's absolutely like in my family, like growing up, like, oh, we'll tell a story about this happened this time. Then as you get older, it's like you kind of get the whispers, you kind of get the aunt that pulls you aside
Yes,
and like tells you the thing that happened, like the real thing that happened. And
yes,
yeah,
exactly, right. Isn't that weird?
Yeah,
But
and this
it's such a southern thing. That's what we do here in the South.
and it's a weird thing of like protecting the reputation of the bad guy, like over and over again.
Yes.
It's just like
Yes.
we all got to whisper about it because we can't hurt the reputation of old so and so. It's like, well, why not? Like we all know that guy's a monster.
Exactly.
Why are we like ignoring this?
Exactly. Why are we protecting them? Well, it's
Yeah.
family. And you go, yeah, but.
Yeah, you go to a funeral and it's like, well, why didn't so and so go to the funeral? It's like, oh, well, you don't know what happened in 1978. It's like
Exactly.
we should all know what happened in 1978, so we don't go to the funeral.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Is, you know, one of the best things that I ever heard about writing, and I'm going to paraphrase this from Joe Lansdale, said something to the effect of, write like everybody you know is dead.
Yeah,
And I thought, from one southerner to another, that's the only way that I could do so much of this stuff, because
yeah,
there is so much of that. How dare you tell that story, or how dare you talk about that? I mean, but as soon as I tell them, oh, what are you talking about? I made that up. Like, of course they're not going to go dig in more and go, well, no, you didn't, you wrote up. And because then they have to tell you the thing, like you say, and they don't want to tell us the thing.
yeah. It becomes an unspoken thing of like, and it's like, all right, I changed enough, and I won't dig any further. It's like you keep
Yeah,
confronting me.
exactly. Let's just roll with it then. Let's just do it.
um, uh, Also, like in addition to your short stories, like you've written a few essays. I know you contributed one on monstrous motherhood for Haunting Hill House. You also did one about like '80s nostalgia surrounding Stranger Things. Um,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
and that's just such an interesting because I feel like it's like the last couple of years it's really been inundated with the whole you know '80s nostalgia, but like a weirdly sanitized version of the '80s, like a very nostalgic like and kind of going to the '90s now too. Like, is that's just an interesting thing to me. Like, it's like I don't think this is the
Yeah.
real '80s.
Right. Well, I mean, so I'm an old, and so I was there, and I'm like, that is absolutely not what that was like.
Yeah,
I mean, so I think that it gives me a little bit of a cool vantage point, though, because I can kind of rummage around in this little nostalgia and kind of go, yeah, but there was also this crazy thing, though. So what about that? That we don't need that to come back, right?
yeah. Like, I remember my oldest was talking about because she started watching Stranger Things about like why can't I ride my bike far off with my friends like they do, like they did in the '80s. I was like, well, also in that era they put pictures of kids' faces on milk cartons because so many were going missing. So they
Yes.
needed to find them. Like there was a
Yes.
reason.
Yes. Right, exactly. There's a total reason, and of course there were the serial killers that were active. Like it was in Atlanta. I know that we could not go outside all willy nilly like that either. After that stuff started happening, I mean, I know it was way in Georgia, but my father was terrified. He was very paranoid about that kind of thing. So after all that started popping up, they were like, "Yeah, no, y'all can't play outside anymore." So okay,
Yeah, because and especially with with those murders, there was just this sense of like no one's really looking into it. The people that could really look
right,
into it and put a stop to this just aren't. So there's added number of fear of
right.
like not only does my kid go missing, no one's going to care enough to look for them. Like
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, no, we don't need that part back at all from
yeah,
the 80s. We can keep that.
yeah, that's I've always been torn on that when I see nostalgia because sometimes people don't. Sometimes people really kind of put it out there like this is what it was actually like. But I feel like there is
Right.
this, and I also wonder how much of that is people that weren't in that era, like that they were too young
Yeah.
or maybe they're too old, like they missed that era, so they put like a sheen on it that's not really there.
Yeah. Oh, I think so. But I mean, but then that's kind of what happens with all these time periods, right? Like, I remember growing up on different sitcoms like Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley. And I mean, they were never talking about the fact that this is the 50s and the 60s, and there was some really, really bad
Yeah,
stuff happening in places. They kind of talk more about the whole, the sock hops and the skater car hop people and the go down to the party place and ride the motorcycle and yay, everybody's friends and let's go help save Timmy from the whale or whatever they did in the 50s and 60s. I'm not
yeah,
quite that old yet. Yeah, yeah. But I think that a lot of times it's just kind of that. I do think that we somewhat tend to forget. the terrible stuff when more terrible stuff happens. So,
Yeah,
for instance, I think that the fact that kids went missing a lot in the 80s, it kind of gets drawn over when we come to like, it's like, yeah, but right now there's an actual war happening. So these are kids that are not just coming up missing, they are literally just being murdered. And
yeah,
so it kind of makes that time seem um, a lot less frightening than it really was. So, I mean, I think you're kind of right that it's people that either weren't there and they just don't know, or they were too old to really engage in the coming of age kind of stuff. Or it's people that are just like, wait a minute, what's happening now is terrifying. Let's go back to when we were at terrifying level A instead of being here at
yeah,
like Q, right? Yeah.
yeah. It's like I think about like my kids, like one is 12, one is 9. So they're probably gonna remember like 2016 through like 2020 times. It's just like, oh, it was
Oh,
just a
mhm.
fun, simple, easy childhood. And I'd be like, no, like it was terrifying. We were terrified all the time. Like
Yes,
fascism was
exactly.
on the rise. Like it was.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, I feel so bad for them because mine are a little bit older. So my youngest are, I have one that'll be 18 next month. So they're like kind of that age range and then older. But yeah, I mean, like this whole time frame has taken so much from them. Like they
Yeah,
remember, like they're still struggling, like socially. They don't really date. I have like two of them that date. The other ones are like, yeah, no, I don't know what that's about, and because the whole current unpleasantness, with
yeah,
COVID and all. Yeah.
yeah. It's a weird thing how like you see so little of it in fiction. And I remember reading a thing about talking about the influenza epidemic in 1918. Like is not in a lot of that contemporary fiction. People just didn't want to.
Mhm.
They didn't want to think about it. They didn't want to talk about it. Like they
Yep.
just kind of like we're just going to ignore it. And I feel like it's almost like I'll read a new short story or something where somebody talks about COVID, and it almost is like, oh okay, like,
Right, right.
is
Yeah,
this a
I
thing
don't
that
know. I don't
happened?
know if it's that whole, yeah, let's not name the demon, let's not call it, and maybe we can pretend that it doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah,
Or, yeah, and I think that a lot of times we just don't want to revisit it. It's like those were, I mean, these are rough times. I mean, don't get me wrong. I personally don't think that things are much better now, but I mean, for all intents and
yeah,
purposes, like we do leave the house now. But I think that's even more frightening, though, is the fact that to pretend that it's not happening. That's
yeah.
crazy. That's insane. That's terrifying to me.
Yeah, because every now and then you'll see the headlines about like it's like oh COVID's it's on the rise and so many millions hospitalized and it's like oh I thought we were. It's just you just kind of put these blinders on to certain things,
Yeah.
and like I said, that's terrifying. Like, and it's one thing when you look at other people doing it, but then when you realize like, oh, I'm the problem. I'm doing it too. Like,
Yes.
that's not great.
Oh, yes. Oh my gosh. Yes, yes, yes. So we still need to be sanitizing. We still need to be masking. We still need to be doing all these things. So yeah, I think that the thing is actually less terrifying than how we all are handling the thing.
Yeah, which I mean, it really reframes a lot of like you know old horror films where it's like why did they go in the basement? It's like well they were ignorant of the danger. Like they're pretending there is no
Exactly.
danger, there is no risk. Like it all makes sense now. Like we laughed at that as a bad trope.
Exactly.
And I was like, oh no, that's absolutely like
Right. It totally does make sense, right? We are no longer in that time where people will say, well, that's not realistic. Well, yeah, it is. Look at what we're doing right today.
um oh and like I thought I didn't realize until recently that like in addition to writing horror, you also write romance. Like you have like the two very different genres, which I think is
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, yeah. I love romance. I mean, like as a reader and as a writer, it just so happened that because I'm so dark natured, the tone of everything I write, even if it's humorous, it tends to be pretty dark. The horror just kind of took off. I said something. I think the last thing I sent out for romance was probably during COVID times, right? During the time when we were isolated, so somewhat. And the editor was like, okay, I love your writing and this is great. She's like, but it's so heavy. She says, maybe have you thought about like romantic comedy? And I'm kind of going, yeah, I think that it's still gonna be heavy. Like whatever I write, it's gonna be heavy like that. So yeah, so that's kind of the thing. So I haven't been able to indulge in romance as frequently as I would kind of like to. Sometimes I'm going, oh, this is a great love story, but I go, no, it's really a horror story with romantic line there, right?
But I feel like that's great because I feel like if because I'm always jealous of people that can write romance because I'm just like, if I could like, if I was better at that, I feel like, relationships and stakes could be so much higher in a story. Like if you can really, like you said, you can write the love story and then like the horrors around the corner. I feel like it hits that much harder.
Yeah, oh yes, of course. Like this horror western that I've been writing for, oh my gosh, like 1,000 years now, and I'm finally finishing up. Like I never thought I'd be
Awesome.
finishing it. It came from the whole idea that when I started my MFA program years ago, I went in as a romance writer. I mean, I came out with a romance thesis, right? But I mean, I came out a much better writer, period. That's where I met my horror people and kind of started really jumping out into the horror world. But I fancy myself as being this. I'm gonna write these historical romances like Beverly Jenkins. Like who does that? Nobody can write like Beverly Jenkins, right? But I thought I want to write them. I love these old stories and I will just do that. And I go, oh no, that's a lot harder than I thought. So what has happened is I've ended up with this historical horror with this very strong romance line through it, but it's very clearly a horror story. It
Oh,
just has
that's gonna
people
be
in
awesome.
it being romantic, right?
Yeah. I think it's fantastic. Like, I mean, is there like a release date on the horizon for it, or is it just finishing up that first draft kind of moment for
yeah,
it?
this yeah, this is just finishing up this first draft so I can finally get it over to my agent now that I have one, kind of let her
Season
poke
two.
through it and see what happens. And yeah, so no, this is that draft that I'm saying like first draft. Really, it feels like a draft 10 because I've started and stopped and reworked and redone and the thing, and I'm going, oh, I just need to get it finished at this point. And so that's actually on the horizon. I'm really excited about that.
Um, yeah, and you mentioned Joe Lansdale earlier. I feel like he's talked about, some people's like, you just run through the first draft, you get done as quickly as possible. If you even just need to have all caps, this happens here. You just get it done. And he talks about like, oh no, I rewrite as I go. So like I'm constantly going over those earlier chapters and tweaking them, fixing them until by
Yes.
the time I write the end, it's more or less done. And so I kind of go
Sure.
back and
Well,
forth on what works for me.
yes. Oh my gosh. Well, my natural inclination is to do it that way. My internal editor is a terrible, terrible lady. She's terrible. She's so mean and ugly. And she's always on my shoulder saying, no, that's not good. Don't do that. But she also makes this longer form a lot more daunting for me to write because it takes
Yeah,
forever. Like I'm always listening to that internal editor and I wish I could turn it off and just get it done. But for whatever reason, that's not how my longer writing brain is working out. So I'm leaning more towards that whole, I'm not going any further until I go and fix that thing that doesn't make any sense back
yeah,
there. Like I got to fix that because if I don't do that, I'm not going to still be able to go forward because I just can't even think about what happens after this because that didn't happen. It happened this way.
yeah. Like I'm always impressed when people do like Patreons and they're like, I'm going to release a book chapter by chapter. I'm like, I feel like I would just be like, here's a new chapter. By the way, I rewrote other chapters. I rewrote every one of them
Right,
leading up to
right.
this. Like, just
That's so funny because I thought the exact same thing. I was like, yeah, no, I would never do that. It's a whole setup. Like I would never finish anything. And they would be so frustrated because no, there's no such thing. Now, individual like shorts, oh, sure. I can crank those out. I sit down
yeah,
and just dump those out of my head and I go, okay, sometimes I rework them, sometimes I don't. That's a lot different from this long form. This long form stuff, I'm like, wait a minute, there's a whole thing like continuity and stuff needs to make
yeah.
sense. And oh, okay.
And it really is like getting focusing on like, okay, what act am I in? Like, okay, I need to tighten up this part, and it is hard. That's why like even novellas can be like, I have one I'm sending out, and like it took me way longer than I thought. Like I started in like spring of 2021. I'm like, I'll have this ready by the fall of 2021. And it's like 2024 and
Right.
I'm sending it places now. Like,
Right, right. Oh yeah, same. Exactly. Like I've been talking about this thing forever. I'm like, people are gonna think it really doesn't exist because you just haven't finished it. But it's I mean, and there's other stuff that I ran into with the historical part too, though. Like I'm kind of a stickler about one thing about Jenkins's work that I absolutely love is that she's always teaching lessons and you don't even know you're learning stuff. Like she does this
Yeah,
extensive research and then relays it in these little bits and pieces. So I go, oh, well, let me do some Old West research. And of course, the story just had to be set before the Civil War. Couldn't be after. It had to be before. And I thought, you actually set yourself up there. You just made this way harder than it had to be, because while I know that there were a lot of black people that were doing things in the Wild West after the Civil War, that whole before the Civil War thing, it's a lot harder to find. It's a lot harder
yeah,
to find, because yeah, there were places in the West that literally had laws on the books that said that free black people could not live there.
yeah.
No, they
Like,
did not allow slavery technically, right? But it flew under the radar. People still went took their slaves with them. They just called them something else. But like once I saw that, I was like, well, how can I talk about black people in the Wild West if they weren't allowed to be there? Like, what do you mean?
yeah, yeah. Because I think Oregon was that way. Like they're just like, nope.
Yes, Oregon. Yes, Oregon was one of those spaces. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, this just ruins my whole story. But actually, I realized that I just need to stop hamstringing myself. Like, it's still fiction above all. And
Yeah,
my thing is, just because we don't know that there were black people in this part of Texas does not mean that they weren't there. We just don't
yeah,
know. And I'm just going to take some liberties and so I can get this thing done.
yeah. Like I wanted to write one about like a family in 1820s Texas out in the middle of nowhere, and like one of them gets rabies, and there's like a race to try and save them. And that was going to be what move the story.
Yeah.
But then like I did the research, and they're like, there's no evidence of rabies in Texas until the 1880s. It's like, oh man, it just
What?
wasn't there.
Well,
And then it's
see, but
like,
I was it could have been. How do we not know? I
yeah,
mean,
that's true, that's
maybe.
true. Like, but I'm like you all of a sudden. I'm like, well, is it accurate? Like, I run into that fiction thing because whenever I read historical fiction, yeah, I'm always impressed with like what they got right and all the research and all the stuff they put into it. So then, like you
Yes.
said, you hamstring yourself.
Yeah, oh, exactly. But I realized that that was more of a me thing. Like and especially when we start thinking about how the stories of marginalized people, they just aren't out there because a lot of times they were passed down orally. So just because there's no written record doesn't mean that they didn't exist. So I just had to put that foremost in my head and say, it doesn't mean that this couldn't have happened. Like, how do we know? We just don't know. So
Yeah,
this is a story that could have happened in a place, maybe, possibly.
yeah. And if anything, there's even higher stakes now because it's like these characters now have like this extra pressure of like there aren't free people allowed there. They have to be, they're being watched, and I don't know. There's like
Exactly.
extra
Yeah,
level of terror
exactly.
to it.
Exactly. So yeah, so I just like, you know what, forget it. I'm going for it because I love historical horror and I feel like this is a story that needs to be told. So
Yeah,
that's what
yeah.
we're
Especially
doing.
filling in those cracks and like I saw a book. It was a friend of mine wrote it for like the Nebraska Historical Society. I can't think of the title offhand, but it was all about the first settlers in Nebraska and in the West that they were black and
Hmm.
that their contributions are just kind of like erased. Like,
Uh-huh.
that these
Uh-huh.
towns will be like, it was founded in this time by this person. It's like there were already people there. There was a town there.
Right.
Like before the founding,
Exactly.
there was a town there, and they had to like just keep
Exactly.
moving, push further and further across the West.
Exactly. Well, and I think that that's really one of the things that we have the advantage of here in Texas is that it has been steadily inhabited for like, thousands of years. And so, when we talk about, well, these people that were here, like literally there was somebody. I mean, so it's historically accurate in that it wasn't something that was just newly discovered. But at the same time, it's like, how do we really know? So I really leaned heavily into that. Like, we just don't know. So we're just going to take it and just run with it.
Oh, and I can't wait to read it. Well, thank you again for coming on here. Like this has been awesome, and everybody watching, be sure to pick up, Hell Hath No Sorrow, like a woman haunted. It's amazing, and that'll get you amped for R.J. Joseph's horror western when it comes out.
Yes, yes, thank you. And it'll be really exciting to meet you in person with no technical difficulties.
Yes,
Um,
yeah,
yeah, here at ZerfCon, that's going to be a
oh
wonderful
yeah,
time. I'm super excited about
yeah.
that.
I can't wait. That's gonna be amazing.
Yes, it is. I'm going to be really excited to be there.